Let's go Ravens. Pay attention, my friends, because something big is brewing in Baltimore. And if you're a Ravens fan, stick with me until the end, because I need to give you some important updates. The team is making some changes that could shake things up. Man, I hope our GM and head coach John Harbaugh are making the right decisions. Before I tell you all the details, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Ravens will make it to the next Super Bowl? If so, hit that like button hard, and if possible, write something like this: Go Ravens, no one will stop us. Now let's get to the point. I want to start by talking about this. First, there's the situation with our Darius Washington, a decision that's raising eyebrows across the fan base. Then there's the release of Marcus Williams and some important additions to the special teams unit that may not seem like much right now, but could have a bigger impact than you think. And let's not forget the unexpected return of Tylan Wallace, a move that has fans split down the middle. But here's the thing. Some of these decisions could backfire in ways the Ravens may not be ready for. So let's break it down and find out what's really going on. Our Darius Washington is a name that Ravens fans have been eyeing, and now his future in Baltimore is on the line. The Ravens have made a $3.2 million first-round offer for him, meaning that if another team comes in with an offer, Baltimore can either match it or let him walk, without receiving any compensation in return. That's right, zero, nada. This is a risky trade because Washington has been one of the most reliable defenders when given the chance, and losing him for nothing would be a tough pill to swallow. The team could have made a second-round offer, which would have at least netted them a pick if he signed elsewhere, but they opted to take the gamble. So what does this tell us? Either they're extremely confident that no team will get him, or they're prepared to move on without him. But with the depth at safety already in question, is that really a gamble the Ravens should take? Now, here's where things get even more interesting. According to reports, the Ravens and Washington had extension talks, but they couldn't come to an agreement. If that's true, then it's clear that there's a disconnect in how Baltimore values him compared to what Washington believes he's worth. The deadline for another team to make a move on him is April 18th. So for the next month, fans will be holding their breath to see if a team desperate for secondary help decides to swoop in with an offer the Ravens can't or won't match. And don't forget, teams know Baltimore's cap situation is tight, which means an aggressive front-loaded deal could make it tough for the Ravens to keep him. If that happens, what's the plan?
Then there's the case of Marcus Williams, who was officially released as a post-June 1st cut. It wasn't shocking, given his cap hit, but it does leave a major question mark in the secondary. With Williams gone and Washington's status uncertain, the Ravens suddenly have a safety situation that feels unstable at best. Who steps up? Do they make a move in free agency? Or is this yet another hint that Baltimore is eyeing a safety in the upcoming draft? And if so, could that push cornerback and edge rusher down the list of priorities? The domino effect here is real, and it's setting the stage for an unpredictable offseason. But let's switch gears to something that flew under the radar. Baltimore made a sneaky free agency move by signing linebacker Jake Hummel from the Rams. If that name doesn't ring a bell, don't worry, you're not alone. Hummel is primarily a special teams ace, playing over 75% of special teams snaps for the Rams last season. It's not a flashy signing, but given that the Ravens lost Malik Harrison and Chris Board in free agency, Hummel's role suddenly becomes more important than most fans might realize. And speaking of special teams, let's talk about the guy who's back in Baltimore, Tylan Wallace. Now, this move is polarizing. Some fans love it, others feel like it's just another example of the Ravens holding onto players who won't have a big offensive role. Wallace, who signed a one-year deal, set career highs last season with just 11 receptions for 193 yards, which isn't exactly eye-popping. But here's the thing, when Wallace does get his opportunities, he makes the most of them. He's a reliable pass catcher, he's physical in the blocking game, and most importantly, he's a key piece on special teams. But let's be real, with Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and DeAndre Hopkins ahead of him on the depth chart, how many chances will he actually get? Could he have found a bigger role elsewhere? Maybe. But he chose to stay in Baltimore, and now it's up to the coaching staff to figure out how to maximize his potential. The bigger question now is whether the Ravens are truly set at wide receiver or if they'll make another move. They've got talent, no doubt about it, but does this group have enough firepower to be a true game-changing unit? And what about the return game? Wallace had that electric punt return a couple of years ago, but is he the long-term answer there? Or should the Ravens still be looking for a dedicated return specialist? These are the little things that might not seem urgent now, but could come back to bite them when the season rolls around. And then there's the big picture. What does all of this mean for the Ravens' offseason strategy? Free agency has been quiet outside of a few small moves, and while that's par for the course with this front office, it does raise the question of whether they're doing enough to put this team over the top. The offensive line still needs attention, the pass rush could use reinforcements, and as we've mentioned, the secondary has its share of concerns. Are they waiting for the draft to fill these holes? Or do they have another move up their sleeve that we don't see coming? One thing is for sure, the Ravens are walking a tightrope this offseason, and how they navigate these decisions will define the 2024 season. So now, it's your turn. What do you think about the Darius Washington situation? Should the Ravens have done more to keep Marcus Williams? And do you think Tylan Wallace will have a bigger role this year, or is he just a depth piece? Let me know in the comments because I want to hear from you. And speaking of big moves, or the lack thereof, one of the most heated debates among Ravens fans right now is whether Baltimore is doing enough to keep its championship window open. Every year, we hear the same thing. The Ravens are right there. They're just a couple of pieces away. But then free agency rolls around, and instead of making splashy moves like some other teams, the Ravens stay quiet, making calculated, often under-the-radar signings. Look at this offseason so far. Losing Marcus Williams leaves a hole at safety, and Darius Washington's situation is still up in the air. The Ravens have yet to make a significant move on the offensive line, a unit that will be critical to keeping Lamar Jackson upright and this offense humming. And while the addition of Derrick Henry last season changed the dynamic of the run game, we still haven't seen Baltimore make a long-term commitment to him. Henry is entering the final year of his deal, and the Ravens front office hasn't locked him up yet. That's a risky game to play with a player who had such a massive impact last season. So, what's the holdup? Could it be that Baltimore is looking to keep its cap flexibility for an in-season move? Or is it a sign that the front office isn't fully convinced Henry is part of the long-term plan? One thing's for sure, Ravens fans aren't going to be happy if they let him walk after just 1 year of dominance. And then there's the wide receiver situation. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and DeAndre Hopkins form a solid trio, but does this group have enough firepower to be a top-tier unit? Flowers is coming off a strong rookie season, but he needs to take that next step and become a true game-changer. Bateman has struggled with injuries and consistency, and while Hopkins is still productive, he's on the back end of his career. If the Ravens are serious about giving Lamar Jackson every weapon he needs, should they consider adding one more piece? And what about the long-term picture at receiver? A big question that's already bubbling under the surface is whether the Ravens will eventually have to make a choice between Bateman and Flowers when it comes time for contract extensions. Bateman is set to hit free agency a year before Flowers, and if his production takes a leap, he could demand a bigger deal than some might expect. Do the Ravens see him as a long-term piece? Or will Flowers' chemistry with Lamar give him the edge when the time comes? But is Baltimore truly maximizing its window? That's where you come in. What do you think? Should the Ravens be more aggressive in free agency? Should they make a big move in the draft? And what should they do about Darius Washington, Mark Andrews, and the wide receiver room? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this is a conversation that every Ravens fan needs to be a part of. Let's hear it.